federal judge has ordered former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and a number of other former top aides to testify in the special counsel's January 6th investigation. The judge rejected Trump's claims of executive privilege. Let's get right to CNN's Evan Perez. Evan, tell us what this means, because this may open the door to so much more information in this case.
It really does, Brianna. The Justice Department has been winning these cases where they're asking a judge to compel some of these former Trump aides to answer questions as part of this investigation into the attempts by the former president to overturn the 2020 election results.
All right, so I need to talk about something that is absolutely blowing up right now, and it involves the ultimate betrayal in Trump world. Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, the guy who was in the room for everything, has completely flipped and exposed what Trump allegedly ordered him to do behind closed doors. We're talking about efforts to overturn the 2020 election. We're talking about hiding classified documents from federal investigators. We're talking about the kind of testimony that could have put Trump behind bars if the political landscape was different. And now viral videos and new commentary are resurfacing all of this explosive cooperation, framing Meadows as the insider who finally betrayed his boss and spilled everything with receipts to back it up. This is absolutely devastating stuff, and most people have no idea how bad it really is. This is not some low-level aide throwing accusations around hoping something sticks. This is the chief of staff. This is the person who sat next to Trump during the most sensitive conversations about clinging to power after losing the 2020 election. This is the guy who arranged the infamous phone call where Trump pressured Georgia officials to find votes. And according to federal investigators, Meadows told them everything. He confirmed that Trump was repeatedly warned he lost the election. He confirmed that Trump pushed schemes to pressure state officials anyway, despite knowing the truth. He confirmed details about how boxes of classified documents were moved around Mar-a-Lago when investigators came looking for them. The man who knew all of Trump's secrets decided to share them with prosecutors. Come on, are you kidding me? Trump's own chief of staff, the person he trusted with his most sensitive secrets and his most important decisions, went before a grand jury and told prosecutors exactly what Trump said and did when he thought nobody outside his inner circle would ever find out. This is the kind of betrayal that cuts deep. This is the kind of cooperation that changes everything about how we understand what happened during those final chaotic days of Trump's first term and the classified documents mess that followed. Meadows was supposed to take these secrets to his grave. Instead, he took them to federal prosecutors. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. Meadows was granted limited immunity by special counsel Jack Smith, which means prosecutors thought his testimony was valuable enough to give him protection in exchange for the truth about what happened. And what did Meadows tell them? According to reporting, he testified under oath that Trump was told repeatedly there was no evidence to change the 2020 result. Meadows allegedly confirmed that Trump acknowledged they didn't win, using the phrase, "obviously we didn't win," but then pushed forward with plans to stay in power anyway, despite knowing the election was legitimate. That's not confusion or bad advice from lawyers. That's knowingly trying to overturn a legitimate election despite understanding the actual truth. And it doesn't stop with the election stuff. In the classified documents probe, Meadows is tied directly into the timeline of how those boxes of secret files were moved around at Mar-a-Lago. Prosecutors have been examining evidence that Trump told aides to hide boxes and mislead officials who were trying to get the documents back for the National Archives. And Meadows, being the chief of staff, would have known about all of it. He would have been in those conversations about what to do with the documents. He would have seen the orders given by Trump and watched them carried out by other staff members. Now, viral explainers and breakdowns on YouTube and social platforms are reframing all of this testimony as the ultimate betrayal of a sitting president by his closest aide. They're calling Meadows a rat. They're saying he sold out his boss to save himself from prosecution. They're highlighting the texts and call logs and internal messages that Meadows turned over to investigators. Documents that place Trump at the center of efforts to pressure states and obstruct the return of classified materials. The receipts are out there for everyone to see. The testimony is on record in federal court, and Trump's inner circle keeps fracturing every single time prosecutors show up with subpoenas and start asking questions. This is the pattern we've seen over and over again in Trump world. People are loyal until they're facing prison time. Then suddenly they remember everything and can't wait to tell prosecutors what they know. Michael Cohen flipped. Cassidy Hutchinson cooperated. And now Mark Meadows, the guy who was supposed to be the ultimate loyalist, has given prosecutors exactly what they needed to understand what Trump ordered behind closed doors. Trump can attack these people as traitors and rats all he wants, but the information is already out there in court records. The testimony has already been given under oath, and no amount of social media rage changes what Meadows told federal investigators. Okay, so let's really dig into what Mark Meadows actually told investigators, because most people only know the headlines and don't understand how devastating this cooperation really was for Trump's legal position. Meadows wasn't just some peripheral figure who happened to overhear a few things while working in the White House. He was literally Trump's right-hand man during the most consequential period of his presidency. He was in the room for everything important. He arranged meetings and phone calls with state officials. He communicated with election officials on Trump's behalf. He saw the classified document situation unfold in real time from the inside.
The official mugshot of Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Meadows just surrendered to Georgia authorities on charges of conspiring to overturn the 2020 election.
Meadows was booked and fingerprinted and paid his $100,000 bond as well.
Meanwhile, joining us now, actually, is senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky. He is outside the Fulton County Jail, where Trump will actually be surrendering.
There is almost nobody on earth who knows more about what Trump actually said and did during this period than Mark Meadows. Let's start with the 2020 election stuff, because this is where Meadows' testimony is most damning for Trump and his claims about the election being stolen. According to reporting, Meadows told federal investigators that Trump was informed multiple times by his own advisors and legal team that there was no evidence of widespread fraud that would change the election result. This wasn't one conversation where someone casually mentioned that the election looked legitimate. This was repeated briefings from people Trump trusted telling him the same thing over and over again. You lost. There's no path forward. The claims about fraud don't hold up to scrutiny. It's time to accept reality and begin the transition. And according to Meadows, Trump acknowledged this privately even while saying the opposite publicly. He allegedly said something along the lines of, "Obviously we didn't win," suggesting he understood the actual situation even while publicly claiming the election was stolen from him. This is incredibly important because one of Trump's potential defenses was always that he genuinely believed the election was fraudulent based on bad information he was given by advisors. But if Meadows is telling the truth, Trump knew. He knew he lost fair and square. He knew the fraud claims were nonsense that wouldn't hold up, and he pushed forward with schemes to stay in power anyway, despite knowing he had no legitimate path. This brings us to the Georgia situation, which Meadows was directly involved in arranging and executing on Trump's behalf. On January 2, 2021, Trump called Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and pressured him to find enough votes to flip the state from Biden to Trump. That call was recorded and became one of the most infamous moments of Trump's attempt to overturn the election results. And guess who arranged that call? Mark Meadows. He was on the line during the entire conversation. He facilitated the contact between Trump and Georgia officials, and he later confirmed to investigators what happened and how it fit into the broader pressure campaign targeting multiple states. Meadows also tracked follow-up pressure on multiple state officials, not just Georgia. The effort to overturn the election wasn't limited to one phone call or one state. It was a coordinated campaign to pressure officials in swing states that Biden won. And Meadows, as chief of staff, was at the center of coordinating that entire effort across multiple states simultaneously. He knew which states were being targeted. He knew what arguments were being used to pressure officials. He knew what Trump was saying privately about the strategy and what the ultimate goals were. This wasn't rogue staffers acting on their own. This was directed from the top. And then there's the classified documents probe, which is a completely separate legal nightmare that Meadows has provided testimony about to investigators. When Trump left the White House, he took boxes of classified documents to Mar-a-Lago in Florida. The National Archives and eventually the DOJ demanded those documents back because they belonged to the government. And what happened next, according to investigators, was a prolonged effort to resist returning the materials and potentially hide them from federal investigators who came looking for them. Meadows is tied into this timeline because he was chief of staff when many of these documents were being handled and packed up for the move to Florida. He would have been aware of what was being taken from the White House and transported to Mar-a-Lago. And prosecutors have been examining evidence that Trump gave specific instructions about moving boxes around and misleading officials who were trying to retrieve the classified materials. If Meadows was in those conversations, and as chief of staff, he almost certainly was present for them. His testimony would be crucial to understanding whether Trump knowingly obstructed the investigation. The viral content now spreading across social media is framing all of this as Meadows finally telling Congress and prosecutors everything he knew with receipts to prove it. We're talking about texts between Meadows and other Trump officials discussing the pressure campaign. We're talking about call logs that show the pattern of communication with state officials. We're talking about internal messages that document what was happening in real time as events unfolded. Meadows didn't just tell investigators what he remembered from conversations. He provided documentation that corroborates his entire account. This is what makes cooperation from someone like Meadows so devastating for Trump. It's not just his word against Trump's. It's his word plus contemporaneous documentation that backs up what he's saying. Prosecutors love this kind of evidence because it's much harder to dismiss or explain away. You can claim someone is lying about a conversation they had years ago. It's much harder to claim that text messages from 2020 and 2021 were somehow fabricated years later to frame you. And here's what's really interesting about the Meadows situation. He's not the only one who flipped on Trump when facing legal pressure. Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney, cooperated with prosecutors and provided damaging testimony about Trump's business practices. Cassidy Hutchinson, a top aide to Meadows, also cooperated with the January 6th investigation and provided explosive testimony about what she witnessed in the White House. The pattern in Trump world is consistent. People are loyal until they're facing serious legal jeopardy. Then they start talking. And each person who flips provides more corroboration for what the others have said. Trump's response to all of this has been predictable. He attacks anyone who cooperates as a rat or a traitor. He claims they're lying to get favorable treatment from prosecutors. He suggests they were never that important or didn't really know what was happening. But the problem with this defense is that Meadows was undeniably important. He was the chief of staff, the most senior position in the White House besides the president. There's no plausible way to claim he was out of the loop or didn't understand what Trump was ordering. Okay, so let's break this down into what really matters because there's a lot to process here, and I want to make sure you understand the key takeaways from this story. Mark Meadows flipping on Trump represents one of the most significant betrayals in modern political history. This is the guy who was supposed to be the ultimate loyalist. This is the guy who protected Trump's secrets and carried out his most sensitive orders. And when faced with potential legal consequences, he told prosecutors everything. Here's what you need to understand about why this matters so much. First point, Meadows confirmed that Trump knew he lost the 2020 election but pushed schemes to stay in power anyway. This is devastating because it destroys one of Trump's main legal defenses. Trump has always claimed he genuinely believed the election was stolen based on information he was given by advisors and lawyers. But according to Meadows, Trump was told repeatedly by his own advisors that there was no evidence to support the fraud claims. Trump allegedly acknowledged privately that they didn't win, and then he pushed forward with efforts to pressure state officials and overturn the results anyway. That's not a president who was misled by bad advisors. That's a president who knew the truth and tried to cling to power despite it. The implications of this testimony are enormous, even if the legal cases have been stopped. It means that when Trump was publicly claiming the election was stolen, he privately knew that wasn't true. It means the entire Stop the Steal movement was based on claims that Trump himself understood were false. It means the pressure on state officials and the events leading up to January 6th were part of a scheme that Trump pursued despite knowing he had actually lost the election fairly. Meadows' testimony transforms our understanding of this period from confusion to conscious wrongdoing by the president himself. Second point, Meadows arranged and participated in the Georgia pressure campaign that could have been the basis for serious criminal charges. The phone call where Trump told Georgia officials to find votes wasn't some spontaneous conversation that happened without planning. It was arranged by Meadows. He was on the call listening to the entire conversation. He facilitated the follow-up pressure on Georgia and other swing states. And he told investigators exactly what happened and what Trump's intentions were. This isn't speculation about what Trump might have meant. It's confirmation from the person who set up the call about what the actual goal was. The Georgia case against Trump was one of the most serious legal threats he faced before returning to power. It was a state case, meaning Trump couldn't pardon himself or have federal officials dismiss it. And Meadows was a key witness whose testimony helped establish what happened and who was responsible for the pressure campaign. The case has now been dismissed, but Meadows' cooperation revealed the inner workings of the pressure campaign in a way that will be part of the historical record forever. Third point, Meadows' involvement in the classified documents timeline raises serious questions about obstruction of justice. When investigators came looking for classified materials that Trump had taken to Mar-a-Lago, there appears to have been an effort to move boxes around and mislead officials about what was there. Meadows, as chief of staff, would have been aware of how documents were handled when leaving the White House. and his cooperation with investigators would have provided crucial information about what instructions Trump gave regarding those materials and how staff responded. The classified documents case was arguably the most legally straightforward case against Trump. It involved physical evidence, the actual documents, and a clear timeline of efforts to avoid returning them to the government. Meadows' testimony would have been important for establishing that Trump wasn't just passively holding on to documents he forgot about, but was actively involved in decisions about hiding them from investigators. Again, the case has been dismissed, but the testimony exists and the evidence was gathered. Fourth point, the pattern of Trump insiders flipping reveals something fundamental about how his inner circle operates. Meadows isn't the first loyal Trump aide to cooperate with prosecutors when facing legal pressure. Michael Cohen did it. Cassidy Hutchinson did it. Multiple other figures have provided testimony against Trump when their own legal exposure became serious enough. The loyalty that Trump demands from his people apparently only goes one direction. When the pressure gets real, his closest allies start talking to save themselves. Trump responds to these betrayals by attacking the people who flip as liars and rats seeking favorable treatment from prosecutors. But there's an obvious problem with this defense. If everyone who was closest to Trump, the people who actually witnessed what he said and did, are all telling similar stories to prosecutors, at some point you have to consider that maybe they're telling the truth. It's one thing to dismiss a single disgruntled former employee. It's another thing entirely when your chief of staff and your personal attorney and your top aides are all saying the same things under oath. The viral content bringing renewed attention to Meadows' cooperation is framing this as the ultimate betrayal, and in many ways, it is. Meadows knew everything. He was there for the most sensitive conversations. He had access to documents and communications that nobody else had, and he turned it all over to federal prosecutors in exchange for immunity protection. From Trump's perspective, this is the worst kind of treachery from someone he trusted completely. From a historical perspective, this is crucial documentation of what actually happened during one of the most consequential periods in American political history. And here's what makes all of this so frustrating for people who wanted accountability. The testimony exists. The documents exist. The evidence was gathered through legitimate legal processes, but the prosecutions have been stopped because Trump is back in power and has dismissed the cases against him. The legal system was moving toward potential accountability, and then the political situation changed and that process ended. What we're left with is a historical record that shows what Trump allegedly did, without the legal consequences that would normally follow such serious allegations. The information Meadows provided isn't going to disappear, though. It's part of court records and congressional testimony and investigative files that will exist forever. Future historians will have access to his account of what happened. The public can evaluate his testimony against Trump's denials and decide who they believe. And viral content like what's spreading now keeps reminding people that Trump's own chief of staff, the person who knew him best, told federal investigators that Trump knowingly tried to overturn an election and may have obstructed investigations into classified documents. So, that's the Meadows situation, the ultimate insider turned ultimate witness, the loyal chief of staff who chose self-preservation over protecting his boss, the testimony that could have changed everything, gathered and preserved even if the legal cases were ultimately stopped, and now viral content bringing all of it back into public consciousness as people try to understand who Trump really is and what he actually did when he thought nobody would ever find out. Stay tuned, because the fallout from these revelations is far from over. Make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment telling me what you think about Meadows flipping, and I'll see you in the next one.